The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday night. Hope everybody's off to a good beginning of your week. I see my podcasting app is all messed up. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to fix that tomorrow. It's saying I exceeded my capacity to store material on the podcast app. All right, we'll have to deal with that. Welcome, everybody. Nice to have you here. We're going to do a quick rundown. What the hell? Need a picture. There we go. That's better. Hi. We're going to do a quick rundown today on the news. We're going to cover a number of different topics. Politicians and staffers buying and selling stocks. We're going to talk about elections in Chile. We're going to talk about Manchin and the Build Back Better, BBB. And we'll talk about socialized medicine and COVID and how the government does not stop screwing it up when it comes to COVID. It's just truly unbelievable. But we'll talk about that, how it continues nonstop. Yes, I'm wearing a T-shirt today. Don't know why, just happened. All right, let's see. If you're so inclined, it would be great if you. I don't need these. If you went on Twitter, just let people know that we are live. Try to get more live participants. That's always good. We do have a goal today, which is, as always, $600 in the super chats. You can use the super chat to ask questions. Pretty much questions. You can ask questions about pretty much anything you want, and I will answer them. $20 questions or more get priority. Of course, ideally, whoever is not a monthly supporter of the Yaron Brook Show will become a monthly supporter of the Yaron Brook Show while the show is going on. And you can do that at yaronbrookshow.com/support. You can do it on Patreon. You can do it on Subscribestar. It would be great if we could double the number of people who support the show. It would be very cool, and it would actually reduce the need to harass you for the super chat. Jonathan, thank you. Jonathan gets us going. Maybe it's 99-cent day. Gets us going with the first contribution, and no question, just support. So you can use the super chat for that as well. All right, let's jump in. There is a ton to talk about, and of course, there's also your questions. Also, today I'm going to give you my review of a Star Trek episode, Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Measure of a Man. We'll do that later on. Charles Bott, I think, paid me some money to do that. I still got a few movies after review, and I'll get to those as well. Not today, but in the next few weeks, in the next couple of weeks, hopefully we can get that done. BBB, somebody says, is Bed Bath and Beyond. I wish that would be much better if we were talking about $1.7 trillion for Bed Bath and Beyond. Bed Bath & Beyond would allocate $1.7 trillion in the economy better than the Biden administration, or for that matter, any political administration could do. All right, just a quick story that I think is interesting, and it's just such blatant corruption that it's worth quickly commenting on. Nothing's going to change here. Nothing's going to happen. So until 2012, Congress was basically, members of Congress were basically excluded from insider trading laws. So Congress, for example, could be discussing in committee behind closed doors the possibility of, let's say, regulating the pharma industry. Congressmen could then, based on their knowledge of the new regulations and of the potential for these new regulations to pass, could then go out and short the pharma industry, the stocks involved. And when the regulation passed, would make a killing off of the fact that they bet that when the regulation passed, the stocks would get pummeled. You could imagine the same with any industries. I mean, what Congress does on an ongoing basis is discuss policies, regulations, restrictions, taxes that have profound impact on industry and on particular companies and on particular sectors of the economy. And yet, up until 2012, they were allowed to trade freely based on that information. And, you know, if you were surprised, as I was always, how it is that politicians came into office poor and left pretty rich, well, this is one source, is that they could freely, with no penalty and no transparency, trade on inside information. Information they were creating, not sharing with the rest of us, and yet they could trade on it. I can't think of anything more despicable, corrupt than that. And of course, you could argue that increased the incentive to pass all kinds of laws and regulations, benefiting some industries, hurting others. They could trade on it. They could make money doing it. Why leave industry alone when there's money to be made? Now, in 2012, Congress passed a law, and Obama signed a law called the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act. And the bill prohibits lawmakers and congressional employees from using non-public information derived from their official positions for personal profit and other purposes. It also required members of Congress, the executive branch, and congressional employees to disclose their financial information on a larger scale. So finally, in 2012, a bill was passed saying you can't trade on inside information. It's wrong, immoral. Even though I'm pro managers potentially leaving it up to the market to decide, for politicians, I say absolutely not. So this was passed in 2012. It really restricted them. They had to disclose, they had to let the world know, and they were prohibited. And if they were caught, there would be real issues. But a year later, in 2013, the law was significantly weakened. Another bill that Obama signed. It was watered down. It watered down primarily the transparency, the reporting, the disclosure. So that while it was still illegal, how would we know if they watered down the disclosure? Now, this was passed by unanimous consent. Didn't even take a full vote. Of course, politicians reducing the burden of disclosure on themselves, keeping as much as they could secret from us, their constituency, is completely consistent with the kind of government that we have, a government that thinks it's above and beyond us, a government that thinks that it is not our servant but our master, a government that thinks that, what the hell, they should be able to do whatever the hell they want. So we've got a bill, it's been weakened, this is what we're living with. It turns out that an investigation by Business Insider that was published on Monday found that 49 members of Congress and 182 senior staffers have violated the Stock Act throughout 2020 and 2021, just during COVID. You remember that early on in COVID, these senators were found, Republicans and Democrats were found to have traded on insider knowledge of COVID, knowledge that they got from intelligence briefings that was not shared with the public, and they made money off of it. There was an investigation launched, and imagine, I mean, I know this will shock you. What happened? to those senators? Exactly nothing. Nothing, nada happened to them. Well, now it turns out that 49 members of Congress and 182 senior staffers violated these laws. A lot of this is because they didn't disclose. And it's just outrageous, and nobody cares. So Pelosi said, oh no, we shouldn't restrict the ability of Congress people to trade. I mean, my proposal, some people are proposing this in Congress, is to just ban, to say if you get elected to Congress, you have to divest from all individual stock you might own. You can own mutual funds, you can own, but you shouldn't be able to trade them. I think the president, this is the situation with the president, that their financial assets are put in a trust, somebody else trades them. Congress should have something similar, less cumbersome maybe, but something similar. So it's proposed not to allow Congress people to have individual stocks. And Nancy Pelosi came out today, said, yesterday I think, you can't do that. She said, quote, this is a free market. And people, we're in a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that. Now, this is outrageous, ridiculous. Sure, they can participate that with mutual funds. And I'm not sure why they should participate in that, because all they do is hamper our economic successes. But Nancy Pelosi is saying we live in a free market? I wish. Nancy, wake up. You've been working to destroy the free market in America for decades. And now what you want is to maintain the ability of your fellow destroyers of the free market to benefit and enjoy the fruits of their manipulation? These people have no shame. But it's more than that. They can't think. They have no conceptual ability. To them, none of this, to them it's just a game. And they're trying to make as much money as they can. And they don't care about anybody else. They don't care about how they do it. They will distort, pervert, cheat, lie, steal. I mean, it's, for Nancy Pelosi, this is a free market, and people, we're in a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that. I mean, if it wasn't so tragic and sad. Yeah, well, it would be funny, and it is funny, I guess, because, I mean, it's beyond, what can we do about it? It's gone beyond, there's almost nothing you can do. They have taken it to such an absurd level. It is so absolutely ridiculous. All right, you are probably talking about ridiculous. You probably heard that Manchin has basically killed BBB, Build Back Better. He basically told the Sunday shows on TV that he's backing away. He's not negotiating anymore. He was playing tough. He was negotiating. He's told Biden that they could probably cut a deal. And Sunday he said, nah, there's no deal to be cut. I think he basically realizes that West Virginia, the state which he is a senator for, does not support another $1.7 trillion of spending, particularly not of the kind of spending, because 1.7 is cheating. It's much, 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 much more than 1.7. Because what the bill is full of is, for example, child tax credits for 1 year. But we all know that those will be extended. But if they only say it's 1 year, they only, quote, value it for 1 year. So only 1 year of it goes into the 1.7 trillion. But if you assume it's a perpetuity and it's there forever, well, it's much more than 1.7 trillion. And then add to that all the different benefits that expanded and new benefits that all in the bill have sunsets, not because anybody believes that they will sunset, but because in order to get the deal somewhat balanced, revenue and expenses, and not to make it be a gazillion dollars, just 1.7 trillion. 1.7 trillion these days is small, is nothing. They have these sunsets, but they know that once you establish a social program, in particular, once you establish a social program that benefits the middle class, it's there forever. Nobody is going to not extend a social program that the middle class benefits from. Just ain't happening. So this bill is actually many trillions, and what Manchin is, I think what Manchin is basically upset at is they're not treating him nicely. I mean, he said today that people in the White House are just not nice to him. I mean, it's not that Manchin is some principled advocate for capitalism. It's not that Manchin really objects to the expansion and growth of social programs. It really is the case that for Manchin, this is just a matter of, he doesn't want to go to West Virginia and say he increased the deficit by 1.7 trillion. He doesn't want to have to go to West Virginia and say he increased taxes. He's worried about elections, as he should be. West Virginia is a very, very Republican place, and he runs as a Democrat. And I think the easiest thing for Manchin would be to just convert to the Republican Party, and that would save him everything. Then he'd be elected as a Republican, and he'd win every time. And he could vote whatever he wants. I mean, Manchin is a nobody, a nothing, a zero. It's not that he has beliefs. But in this case, what the Biden administration with a 50-50 Senate is trying to do is so outrageous, so ridiculous, so off the charts, so dishonest, that somebody like Manchin, for purely political reason, is calling them on it. Now, I will guarantee you that there are probably a dozen Democrats, Democratic senators, that are sighing a sigh of relief because they don't want to vote for this bill. They can't not vote for it, probably, but they don't want to be in a position one way or the other to vote or not to vote on it. They are loving the fact that Manchin is getting all the blame for walking away from it. And they don't have to engage in it. All these centrist, so-called centrist Democrats who don't want to have to face the constituency having voted for a loser bill like this bill that expands government, that expands government spending, that doesn't pay for it, that expands the deficit during inflation, expands government spending by giving people checks, the equivalence of giving people checks, that is just inflationary as well, in spite of what some economists claim, pseudo-economists claim. Oh, Seth says Manchin may be the least principled politician in the history of politics. Oh, no. They are far more less principled politicians than Manchin. I mean, God, there's no end. There's no end. Manchin is just in this tricky position of being in a 50-50 Senate where he is the swing vote, where he has to get elected in West Virginia. I mean, Trump was less principled than Manchin. I promised to hold no punches on Trump, so he will be mentioned frequently, in spite of the fact that you don't like it. Some of you don't like it, anyway. Some of you keep coming back. So I think what's going to happen here is that the Democrats are going to go back, structure a new bill that'll be negotiated on. Some of the other centrist Democrats are going to have to intervene because they won't like it too much. And, you know, they'll pass something next year, probably. Next year is difficult because it's re-election, right? It's an election year. So a lot of these centrist Democrats won't want to vote for it. There's a good possibility nothing gets passed before 2022. And there's a good chance that Democrats lose both the House and the Senate in 2022. Which is my hope, yes. All right, so just that was quick news on Manchin and BBB. So BBB is basically sidelined for now. We'll see what happens after the new year and what kind of progress Democrats can make. Democrats just on this issue of Manchin being the most unprincipled. Think of the Republicans. In the 2 years that Trump had the White House, the Senate, and the House, think of Republicans not repealing Obamacare. Think of Republicans not cutting government spending. Think of Republicans not passing any significant bill other than cutting taxes a little bit. Well, corporate taxes was good and more significant. But and think of all the unprincipled Republicans that had to go into not getting anything done, even though they had all the levers of power for 2 years. So, Shazbad, I'm glad you're here because we're going to be talking about the measure of a man. Measure of a man. All right. Let's see. Yeah, look, Build Back Better is just more evolution towards a greater and greater and greater welfare state. It's more pushing the United States to be more like Europe. It's more redistribution of wealth. It's more redistribution of wealth towards the middle class. It's more middle class benefits. It's making the middle class more dependent on government. But it's also accelerating the bankruptcy of the United States government. So in that sense, maybe it's good. Maybe we should pass it. Maybe we should pass it. All right. Let's see. Where do we want to go from here? We've got some good sizable super chat questions. Which is good, but we're way, but we've got a long way to go to reach our target. So keep them coming. $50 questions, $20 questions. I'm loving it today. It's really, 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 really cool. All right. Depressing news. Chile, which has one of the freest economies in the world, a top 20 economy, sometimes a top 10 economy in terms of freedom. Chile, who has gone since the early 1980s till today, over the last 40 years, from the poorest country in Latin America on a GDP per capita basis to the wealthiest country in Latin America on a GDP per capita basis, just elected a real socialist, a pretty radical socialist as president. Now, this in spite of the fact that in the midterm, 2 months ago, in the elections for the parliament, the center right did very well. So it's going to be interesting, like the interplay now. But in a battle between Gabriel Boric, who's young, 35 years old, very cool, I hear, very socialist, in an alliance with the Chilean Communist Party, committed to rolling back almost all the reforms that made Chile wealthy, that made Chile successful. Committed to rolling back one of the great achievements in economics, in political economy of the last 40 years, which is the privatization of Social Security in Chile. Chile has a private Social Security scheme. And he is now committed to rolling that back, to eliminating that, to putting it back into the hands of government, which is, it's hard to express the extent to which that is tragic, horrific, disturbing, disgusting. So the private pension system, which was privatized by the brother of the current president of Chile decades ago. The new president is committed to doing away with that. And the Chilean people have voted for this. Now, part of the problem is that the person he ran against in the election was a white, right-wing, religious, nationalist, narrow-minded conservative, rightist, who actually on several occasions has expressed longing for the dictatorship of Pinochet. So you have two candidates. A right-wing nut, who Catholic, very religious, reestablished a lot of the restrictions in individual liberty, who admires Pinochet, a brutal dictator, who happened to have the right economic policies almost by chance, or a leftist Marxist, young, cool, hip, who's promised to be moderate, but is going to undo all the stuff that led to Chile's prosperity. Who do you vote for? Now, in this case, I probably would have voted for the religious nut if I was in Chile. But this is the impossibility of left versus right. Suicide by collectivism on the left or suicide by collectivism on the right. Choose your poison. Choose how you want to die. This is why we have to fight collectivism of left and of right. This is why our only hope globally is to resurrect a classical liberal or free market right. And if we don't, then we'll be left in situations where we have to choose between crazy collectivists of the right or crazy collectivists of the left. And sometimes we'll choose the crazy collectivist of the left and we'll die that way. And sometimes we'll choose the crazy collectivist of the right and we'll die that way. But we are positioning ourselves to where all our choices are evil. And when you, I'm talking to you who know who I'm talking about, when you support the crazies of the right, when you rally around the crazies of the right, the collectivists of the right, you are responsible for these crazy, nutty choices. I mean, given Trump's first 4 years, he should have been challenged by a Republican, and somebody else should have run in this instead of him in 2020 and beaten Joe Biden. But it's because he's so popular among Republicans. Nobody did it. Nobody would have won. And thus, we're stuck with Joe Biden. And, of course, here I'm talking about the midterms again, the 2024 election. There better be somebody better than Trump on the ballot. And again, otherwise you're stuck with choices like Chile. And what happens is, what we're getting today is, the left becomes more left, the right becomes more right in a collectivist sense, and you're stuck with two bad options. And that's what we got in Chile. So it's really bad news from Chile. I visited Chile for the first time in, when was it? In 2019, before COVID. I was looking forward to going back. I was planning to go back in 2020. It is a wonderful country, beautiful country, and it's a country that has done phenomenally well under somewhat free market policies. But it is an example of where if you don't defeat Catholicism, if you don't defeat religion, if you don't defeat altruism, it's really hard to hold on to freedom and capitalism. Fundamentally, religion is antagonistic to freedom, antagonistic to capitalism. And you see it in Latin America. They take 2 steps towards free markets, and then their religiosity kicks in, and they back off towards the socialism, which was much more consistent with their religion. And you see it everywhere. And Latin America is a truly sad place as a consequence. I think I've told you this. Argentina in 1914 was as rich as America. 1914. I mean, America was pretty rich on a per capita GDP, maybe the richest in the world. And Argentina was just below. And since then, Argentina today has, 20%, 15% of the GDP per capita of the United States. Bad policies, bad governance has horrific consequences. As we know, when we see Venezuela, and yet a number of Latin American companies from Ecuador to Chile are trying to become the next Venezuela. All right, let's see. Where are we? We have, all right, so we are where? Nobody's keeping track. Where is Annalise? We're at about $200, so still room for a lot more questions, even at the $50 and $20 level. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Shazbad, and thank you, Liam, for asking a question. Tessie, thank you, really appreciate it. So somebody sent me this story from Canada, which more depressing stories, which I thought was super revealing of, again, kind of the state of the world in which we live. I mean, COVID has been a catastrophe. But COVID has been a catastrophe in ways that I don't think people appreciate. That is, it's been a catastrophe for evaluating the role of government in healthcare. Government has failed throughout COVID everywhere, pretty much everywhere in the world. Right-wing governments, left-wing governments have all screwed it up. Trump completely messed up COVID. So is Biden. Hungary and Germany. Even Sweden didn't exactly get it right. COVID has been this massive illustration of the fact that government messes healthcare up. It doesn't add value. It destroys value. Now, I don't have an example of a country where the market, free of government intervention, dealt with COVID. I can tell you what I think would happen if we had capitalism. Wanda Freeman says Japan is doing well now. For now, until this, Japan was doing well from the beginning, but it was doing well for a variety of reasons that nobody really understood, right? Early on, there were almost no infections in Japan. They managed to isolate and pockets of COVID and deal with them. So Japan has managed to, death per capita in Japan are very, very low. I mean, the best country in the world to deal with COVID has been Taiwan. And Japan now has one of the highest vaccination rates in the world. It is very highly vaccinated. But that doesn't really matter in terms of cases. It doesn't matter for Omicron, at least not for cases. It does for severity. And that's what you see in Japan. It's why you're seeing hospitalization and deaths plummet. It's because they're vaccinated. They've got over 70%, I think close to 80%, maybe now over 80% of their population vaccinated. Taiwan dealt with the crisis very well initially. But even Taiwan has got real problems of how to open up now, how to expose itself. And it didn't have a good rollout of the vaccines. But here's a simple example of the extent to which government has completely messed this up. Well, from very early on, right, it has been clear how you deal with the pandemic. The CDC knew this early on. I mean, I've said this a million times. You test, trace, isolate. Isolate the people who actually have the virus. You don't lock down people who don't have it. That is immoral. It should be illegal. But in order to test, you have to be able to test. And you have to be able to widely test. And from the beginning, testing has been an unbelievable disaster. It was a disaster because the CDC tried to develop their own test. It was a disaster because the CDC's test that they developed failed. It was a disaster because while the CDC was developing their own test, they wouldn't allow labs and universities and private labs to develop their own test. It was a disaster because even though in the summer of 2020, a year and a half ago, there were already rapid tests developed that were cheap and effective, the FDA would not permit them to be distributed. It's only this year that we got rapid tests distributed. It's a disaster because instead of focusing on testing, I mean, this scientist by the name of Mann, I think, Michael Mann, is it Mann? I think it's Mann, from MIT, I think. Last summer was saying what we need is for everybody to have a stack of tests in their home. You know, easy test, saliva test, you test it quickly before you leave home. If you're negative, if you're positive, you stay home. If you're negative, you go. That's it. You solve the problem. And then, of course, vaccines. And once vaccines are not effective in terms of cases and you're still worried about cases, test. But they can't get it right. So now they want to give out tests for free. And the government is going to be responsible for this. Now, what do you think is going to happen if you give out tests for free? Well, you're going to run out of it. Michael Mina, sorry, not Mina? Not Man, Mina, right? Michael Mina. There's also a chef by the name of Michael Mina. That's why I'm confused. But yes, Michael Mina is the scientist, the MIT scientist. When you give out the tests for free, what happens? Well, everybody grabs them, whether they need them or not, whether they think they're serious or not, whether there's a desire or not, they just grab them, and you run out. So in Canada, they have been handing out rapid tests for free in Ontario. And there's video up online that you can see people standing in the snow waiting to get their free rapid test. Long lines. I don't know how long. Long, like hundreds of people waiting in line. What do you think happened? They ran out of tests. So, in the United States, it's hard to find tests because the government has made them so that it's not as profitable as it should be. And it's not a primary focus. And the government is subsidizing one treatment, let's say vaccines, and not subsidizing testing. By what standard? Why are vaccines subsidized? Why are all of us getting vaccines for free? Who's paying for it? Why? Doesn't that create distortions and perversions? Well, of course it does. Any form of socialism in healthcare is going to distort and pervert. I'd argue that one of the problems with vaccines is that because they are the government's preferred option, because they are promoted nonstop by the government, anybody with a healthy skepticism of the government develops a healthy skepticism of vaccines. So instead of the government promoting vaccines actually increasing their usage, I think particularly in places like the United States, it decreases their usage. Vaccines should have never been free. Vaccines should have never being bought by the government. Vaccines should have never been distributed by the government. Pfizer used their own money to develop the vaccine, but Pfizer sold vaccines to governments. Private individuals are not allowed to buy vaccines. But what should have happened is we should have allowed the market to work. Government shouldn't have bought the vaccines. Insurance companies should have bought the vaccines. Big businesses should have bought the vaccines. Individuals should have bought the vaccines. And then people would have used the vaccines because not the government told them it's the right thing to do, because the government shouldn't be in the business of science. The government shouldn't be in the business of advising us on what to eat, what to drink, what to inject into our body, what tests we should use, what tests we shouldn't use, how many shots we should be getting. Yes, experts should be advising us on this. Yes, it would be great to have expertise in how to do this, because I wouldn't know. But all of that expertise should be outside of government. Government can only corrupt it. Government can only pervert the incentives, and government can only cause us to be skeptical of them. I don't trust the Pentagon. I don't really trust the FBI. I know I don't trust Congress. And I don't trust the president. I haven't trusted a president in a long, long time. So should I blindly trust the CDC and the FDA? Particularly the FDA? Do you know the FDA? We've talked about this. Pfizer has a drug. Pfizer has a drug that basically reduces mortality from COVID to close to zero. Safe. Proven in clinical trials. And the FDA won't approve it. Why? Who knows? Because they have to dot all the I's and cross the T's and have their committees and have their commissions and do the stuff that bureaucrats do so that they can have their risk aversion instead of giving us the choice of whether we can use it. And of course, they'll probably want to, I don't know, is the government going to buy the pill? Is the government going to make the pill mandatory? Yeah, I have to be careful with COVID. YouTube says that if I don't give advice consistent with the local health authorities, they're going to take me off. So hell, if they take me off, they take me off. Do I trust my local health authorities? I trust my local doctor for the most part. I trust my local doctor if I can get a second or third opinion. I trust scientists generally. I trust most doctors, but then for every doctor that you trust, there's like 5 flakes. All you have to do is look at the doctors interviewed by Joe Rogan and you can find the flakes. So at least it's easy to screen out the flakes. Right? I don't want government in my health care, even during COVID. Their only job was to isolate the people who are positive. Make sure they don't infect other people. Make sure they're not Typhoid Jane, who went around infecting people with typhoid. Keep them away. Yeah, I trust Amish. But trusting Amish is not enough in a world in which every decision around healthcare is a political decision. It's so frustrating. And of course, that's just COVID. But the government is involved in the food we eat. There's a food pyramid. Why is the government telling us what to eat? The government is involved in treatment protocols, in approving drugs and disapproving other drugs. The government Ken says, refute the arguments you run down, call them flakes. I have refuted their arguments. They are flakes. And in cases where I haven't refuted their arguments, other much better doctors, much more qualified doctors have refuted their claims. So No, I'll call them flakes. Given the amount of work I've done refuting the bullshit about COVID, I can say flakes because I have refuted them. On the things that I've dealt with and the other things, other people have refuted them. Other very well-qualified people have refuted them. It's not hard to refute them because many of their errors are so rudimentary. Rudimentary. Apollo Zeus is, I'm incendiary? Me? Incendiary? You've got the wrong person. Jennifer says she doesn't want to eat a pyramid because I said you should eat the food pyramid. Only pyramids made of chocolate. Those are good. Those you should definitely eat. All right, government today is in every aspect of our healthcare. And of course, in the United States, we have somewhat a private healthcare system. So some aspects of our healthcare are private in the sense that I can choose my doctor. If I don't like my doctor, I fire them and go and get another doctor. I don't have to listen to a particular doctor. And even in some respects, I don't have to listen to the government. I can go to a private hospital, to a private doctor, and get alternative treatment. And by the way, most of you can even get ivermectin if you want to treat your COVID. Your doctor can prescribe it. But in many countries, these are not options. In many countries, like the United Kingdom or like Canada, you don't have the option of choosing your doctor, choosing your hospital, shifting, changing, and not going by the acceptable standard treatment protocol that is being authorized by the government authorities. In many countries, like the NHS in the UK, you do what the doctor assigned to you, tells you to do. You get the protocol that he approves of, and he gets that protocol not from his own mind, not by thinking, but by looking at whatever he gets from the top of the NHS bureaucracy. And you get this across the board in socialized medicine. Socialized medicine becomes conformity medicine. I think I told you this story, but I once went to a doctor where every time he would test to get a result or anything, he would say, okay, let's look at what the recommended treatment is. And he'd go online, literally in Google, and he would go to, I don't know, the American Heart Association or whatever it was website. He'd say, okay, look, this is the test result. This is what they advocate treating. This is what we're going to do. And I'm like, I know how to use Google. I'm not paying you, I don't know, $150 an hour to use Google. I'm paying you $150 an hour to use your brain, to use your mind. To apply, yes, take that into account, take the best practices, but then take into account who I am, what my physiology is. Take into account the latest articles you might have read that might contradict this. Take into account the best, not the most conforming medicine out there. So today I have 2 primary care physicians who are both nonconformist and who think for themselves. But socialized medicine doesn't give you that option. You can't do what I'm doing, which is have multiple doctors. They do all kinds of tests, as long as I pay for them. We do all kinds of tests. And looking for all kinds of things. I want to live to be 120 at least. So I told my doctor last time I spoke to her, I said, all right, you know what your job is? She said, you know, what? I said, keep me alive to 150. And she said, absolutely. That's the kind of doctor I like, right? That's what we're working on. But you can't do that in socialized medicine. You can't do that in Canada. Canada, you wait in line. Yes, sir. And in Canada, in the United States, the government provides us with massive misinformation about, or confusing information, and sometimes misinformation about our health. Think food pyramid, and how many times they've had to change it, and they don't change it because there's special interest groups that prevent it from. But even COVID, maybe it's not misinformation, but it's confusing, and changes all the time, which leads us to be skeptical, and maybe. You know, I think a lot of the skepticism about COVID, about vaccines, is because of the way the government has sold it. Right? So, you know, in Canada, you don't even have the choice. Whatever the government sells, that's what you have to accept. At least in America, we have the option of not doing what the government tells us. Not doing what the government tells us. So let's try to fight, not try, what try? Let's fight to prevent socialized medicine in the United States. And again, the only way to do that is to find politicians who are classical liberally minded, pro-free markets, and not only want to undo Obamacare, but want to actually undo the entire healthcare system in the United States and restructure it on a foundation of freedom, on a foundation of individual choice, a foundation of private healthcare with as little government intervention as we can get away with. All right, that was 50 minutes. Let's jump to your Super Chat questions. We have a bunch of Super Chat questions and a bunch of topics. We are at about $250, so there is $350 to go to 600. But you know, why are we limiting ourselves to 600? It is December. It is the month of giving and the month of benevolence and the month of investing in your future and figuring out everything. We should be hitting $1,000 every one of these shows. I'm not going to do that to Annalise today because she's working hard to get us to 600. And yesterday we didn't make it. We fell like $20 short, which is hard to believe. So we ruined our perfect track record for December. But today we need to make up for it. So we need to make more than 600 so we can make up for the fact that we didn't do it last time. Remember, on a serious note, that this is how I make a living. I make a living from this. One of the ways in which I make a living, but it's an important way. My time, I do 4 shows a week at 2 hours a show approximately, 8 hours a week. That doesn't include prep. It doesn't include the technical side. It doesn't include the marketing staff that I have, the tech side of the whole thing. These shows are expensive to produce, they're expensive to run, they're expensive to do, mainly time. So by supporting the show through Super Chat or through a monthly contribution, you make these shows possible. You compensate me for the time that I spend on this. Tessie says she spent all her money on presents. What did I get? Actually, Tessie was generous in a Super Chat contribution a little earlier. And she usually gives during the shows, so. Yeah, today was a little bit of an impromptu show because I couldn't do one tomorrow. So my schedule changed, couldn't do tomorrow, so doing it today instead. All right, let's jump into the questions. Hopefully answering questions will encourage you guys to ask more questions and to put dollars with those questions. By the way, just to quickly announce, 2 shows coming up on Thursday. We're going to do a show, Is Morality Practical? So this will be more of a show along the lines of Yaron's Rules for Life. But is morality practical? And I also want to talk on that show about why be benevolent. Is benevolence a virtue? Is it an important virtue, a minor virtue? What is the role of benevolence in life, which I think is a good Christmas topic. On Sunday, the day after Christmas, we're going to do a Christmas hangout. So anybody who's given $25 or more will be on with me on Zoom via video. We'll be live streaming it. And just hanging out, I'll take questions, we'll chat, we'll talk, we'll have fun. Maybe bring some eggnog or bring some rum. Or, in Puerto Rico, there's a drink called Kikoto, something like, I don't know, can't pronounce it, that blends eggnog with rum and a lot of coconut, and it's really good. It's really good. So maybe I'll bring a little bit of that. Bring a little bit, we'll have a little Christmas party. That'll be Sunday at 2 p.m. East Coast time. Maybe a little early for you West Coasters to be drinking, but certainly Tessie in London, it'll be an ideal time for her to be drinking. So Sunday, 2 p.m., Thursday, 8 p.m., 7 p.m., and Thursday will be why is morality practical? Is the moral practical? Is the practical moral? Why is it? How does that work? What makes it so? And then we'll talk about benevolence as a virtue. So that should be a fun show, a good show, a positive show. And hopefully you'll come ready with your checkbook. Okay, let's see, we get some $50 questions. One $50. Michael says, I don't think Americans will tolerate fully socialized medicine. Even England, France, and Germany allow private options. Although Canada has made any form of private insurance illegal. Is this because Canadians can cross the border to use our health care? Well, I don't think that's the reason, but yes, I mean, Canadians have the advantage of coming to the U.S., so do Europeans, at least wealthy ones. But look, England has private health care only for the wealthy. You have to be pretty wealthy to be able to afford private health care in England. And even then, the private hospitals are not up to snuff. They're not up to the standards of America because there's just not enough capital there. There's not enough profitability. I don't know that much about the French system. Germany is a better system than the UK, and the private option is more accessible. Switzerland has a system more similar to the United States. I don't know that how much Americans will resist socialized medicine, particularly if they're allowed a private option. Now, in a sense, we already have socialized medicine, right? Medicare is socialized. Medicaid is socialized. 50+% of every dollar spent on healthcare in the United States is spent by the government. Our insurance companies are massively regulated. Insurance policies are all standardized around the requirements of government. Our healthcare system in the United States is socialized. Now, I agree with you that I don't think the American people would go for an NHS-like system. But as our system produces more inefficiencies and more costs, people will get more upset by it. People will get more angry with it. And as a consequence, I think Americans will become more and more and more open to some form of socialized medicine. Exactly what form it'll take, hard to tell, but some form of socialized medicine is coming our way. And I've always said, I think a Republican will be the president, to sign that bill into law. All right, let's see. Shazbat says, permission to speak about whatever you want, including Trump. It's much easier to be yourself. Yeah, I know. All right, we have a bunch of $20 questions. This is nice. But we definitely need more $20 questions, so please chip in. So far, almost all the questions are from Michael. So it'll be nice to get a little bit of diversity here of questions and supporters for the Yaron Book Show. Where's Best Friend Hank? Best Friend Hank has kind of disappeared. He used to be a regular live listener. And you remember Best Friend Hank? He used to try to get me, try to mail me hamburgers. Completely disappeared. Don't know what's going on. All right. Michael asks, you and everyone at ARI would be willing to engage in civil disobedience if the government abolished free speech, even if we, the Objectivist movement, don't have the numbers and all get thrown in jail. Yes, absolutely. I would be willing to do it, even if free speech is an important enough issue to engage in civil disobedience. What does civil disobedience look like in terms of free speech? It means standing up and speaking. What is not allowed? Speaking up against the banning of free speech. So yes, I will not stop speaking, even when they try to muzzle me. And even if that means ultimately landing up in jail. But free speech is one of those unique principles that without it, I don't have a job. Without it, I don't have a purpose. Without it, I can't change the world. It is so crucial to anything. It's the one thing that I would be willing to go to jail for. All right. Next question is by Liam. How can you argue the socialist policies in San Francisco are causing the homeless problem while simultaneously saying the socialist policies in Western Europe are why they have less poverty? Because I've said over and over and over again that the United States is very bad, very inefficient in its social programs. And so think about this. What are the socialist policies in San Francisco that are causing the homeless problem? The main one is not in my backyard building, which is causing the cost of housing to go through the roof, so that nobody can afford to live in San Francisco or in any of the neighboring neighborhoods. So you can't live there. That's one. Second, people who don't have homes, who are homeless, are then, when they come to San Francisco, are given all kinds of goodies and freebies. This is particularly true of LA, where they're giving free housing. And then there's no, I mean, look, if you wanted to design a better social system, socialist system, you could, right? From this perspective, the perspective of helping the poor. And I think Europe does it better than the United States. I mean, Europe is tougher in many regards, in some places at least, requiring them to work, in providing them with housing, in not creating as big of a disincentives to work. The United States has huge disincentives to work. And they just run this, they have more, they just invest more in making sure that the people at the very bottom are not there. They hold them up. And the cost of that is that the middle class in Europe is significantly poorer than the middle class in the United States. And far fewer people in Europe are rich. Whereas the upper class, what you'd consider upper class, you consider the wealthy in the United States, that is a very large group, much larger than in Europe. And the cost of that is that they are much better, more efficient, they spend more money at it, and they figured it out how to help the people at the very bottom. What is truly stunning about the United States is that our efforts have gone primarily in terms of social programs, not to helping the poor, but to helping the middle class. So the largest social services programs in the United States are Medicare by far and Social Security. Well, Medicare is free, unlimited health care to old people, the majority of which are middle class. And Social Security is a pseudo pension system for people who retire, the majority of which are middle class. And in terms of the redistributive dollars that we spend, most of the redistributive dollars that we spend are on those programs, and therefore on the middle class. The United States doesn't spend a lot of money, as much money as Europeans do, on actual poor, on helping them, on keeping them afloat. And again, the Europeans are more efficient. In the US, we have 1,000 different programs, all run by different agencies, some by the state, some by the federal government. It's a mishmash that is incoherent. Most poor people don't even know how to take advantage of all the benefits they could get. It's just a mess. And in Europe, they've got it down. Now, again, there's a cost to that, a huge cost to that, to the middle class and to the wealthy. Europeans are willing to vote to sacrifice some for others. Americans pretend that they're sacrificing or pretend that they're voting for that, but they're really voting themselves benefits, Medicare and Social Security, and they're not really invested in efficiency and of their welfare programs. And look, the primary cause of homelessness is that in America, we've made it impossible to build low-income housing because of all the regulations and all the constraints and all the non-backyard. But the fact is that if you build a regular condo in the US, the cheapest condo possible based on the regulation, for example, how many square feet, minimal square feet, how many bathrooms per square feet. Europe doesn't have this. I mean, if you go European middle-class homes, they're small. If you go to homes that poor people live in, they're tiny. But in the United States, you cannot build tiny homes. It's illegal. In the United States, you cannot build small condos. It's illegal. Or if they're small, they have too many, it's just too expensive because of regulations. So in the 80s, they knocked down a lot of the public housing in Chicago, or places like Chicago and New York. A lot of poor people lost their homes because they knocked these down. And then in their place, they build so-called low-income housing that low-income people couldn't afford. Couldn't afford. So they became homeless. Alex says, another factor in homeless is the weather in California. It is very hospitable weather. If you're going to be outside all day, California is the place. Yes. So California has no bugs. So it's relatively, it's the place. If you're going to live outside, California is the place to live. And that's part of why California has the number of homeless they do. But look, Austin has homeless people now. Homeless people were a real problem in New York. They're a problem all over the country. All over the country. It's not gentrification because people are investing in turning poor neighborhoods into rich neighborhoods. It's gentrification because the cheapest housing you can build by regulation is expensive. And therefore poor people can't move in. Michael says, objectivism is growing at an agonizingly slow pace. Tell me about it. I think it's a cop-out to say it's growing so slowly because it's hard and radical. All right, well, you tell me why it's going so slowly. Because I'm bad at what I do, I guess. Well, what's the alternative to saying that it's hard and radical? I'm open. Best friend Hank is back. Where is he? Oh, best friend Hank, you're back. Where were you? I haven't seen you in like a month. Weeks. I certainly haven't seen your dollars in a month, weeks. How did best friend Hank show up just when I said I haven't seen best friend Hank in so long? All right. So I don't know, Michael. You're going to have to offer me an alternative explanation. It's not enough to say it's a cop-out. It needs to be explained. All right. Yeah, it's cheap to, Alex says it's cheap to build in Detroit. Yeah, but nobody wants to live in Detroit. Problem is it's expensive to live in the places people want to live in. He never left. Best friend Hank never left. Then why is he so quiet? Why is he so quiet? All right. Michael asks, what is your assessment of Theodor Herzl? Theodor Herzl is the founder of the Zionist movement. I think Herzl is a real hero. I have quite a positive assessment of Herzl. I don't know how many of you know the story of Herzl. I think it's an interesting story, so I'll tell you the story quickly. It could be told in a lot more detail. But Herzl was a very successful journalist from Vienna in late 19th century Vienna, right, in Europe. He was born a Jew, but was completely assimilated into Viennese society, into European society, and believed as a young man that that's what Jews should do. They should basically assimilate. And, and there was no point in being a Jew. He was a European. He was an individual. He was a man. And that was his position until he covered, as a journalist, the Dreyfus trial. I don't have the exact dates of the Dreyfus trial, but it's late 19th century. The Dreyfus trial is a famous trial in French history. It is a trial of a very senior military official for treason. The military official was Jewish. Dreyfus was a Jew, a completely 100% assimilated Jew. Somebody who didn't consider himself Jewish, didn't practice Judaism, and considered himself a Frenchman, completely assimilated into French society, and was a senior officer in the French military. And yet, Dreyfus was accused of treason and convicted of treason for clearly anti-Semitic grounds. There was no basis for the case. There was no reason to suspect him. But he was tried and convicted based on needing a scapegoat and needing the scapegoat to be Jewish. Right? Not Richard Dreyfus. I forget his first. I forget the first name of Dreyfus. But you can look it up. You can Google Dreyfus trial. Anyway, Herzl. This trial really shook Herzl, and he came to the conclusion. This is late 19th century. He came to the conclusion that Europeans would accept accept Jews. That even if the Jews completely assimilated, even if the Jews stopped considering themselves Jews, Europeans would always hate them, despise them, and ultimately destroy them and kill them. In a sense, he predicted the Holocaust. He predicted Hitler. Now, we're not talking about Jew as a national identity, because Jews didn't have, certainly then, a national identity. We're talking about, I don't know, Jews, an ethnic group, a religious group. What is Jew? It's hard to tell what a Jew is. And Jews are unique because people don't care if you're Hungarian, or if you're Dutch, or if you're Italian, or if you're French, or, and that's true even in America. There's very little interest in that after a few generations. But Jews are always Jews. And Herzl came to the conclusion that the only way the Jews could survive, the only way the Jews could avoid a Holocaust, the only way the Jews could avoid being wiped out by the haters of the Jews, is to found their own country. And that was the basis on which he became a Zionist. He was not religious. He was not a nationalist. He was not a tribalist. He basically concluded that in order to defend himself, he was put in this ugly position by European society, that he had to ally himself with other Jews and form their own state where they could defend themselves. He was such a secular Jew that when the British offered the Jews to establish a country in Uganda, middle of Africa, Uganda, the British literally said, all right, you Jews want a country? We've got Uganda. We don't know what to do with Uganda. You can have Uganda. Herzl said, yes, I'll take it. Very few other Zionists agreed, and they voted it down. But he was willing to do it. He was willing to do it. And to me, the justification for the existence of the State of Israel as a, I don't know, what do you want to call it, nationalist place, as a place that cares about your ethnicity or cares about your alliance with Judaism, is that the Jews are different. Not in a good way, in a bad way. The difference in that they're always hated. The difference in that they are always persecuted. And that anti-Semitism will not die and seems not to die. And that in order for them to overcome that, in order for them to survive, to exist, they need a sanctuary, they need a place where they can go to. And that is why I think Israel is legit in its exclusion, if you will. And then, of course, it's a free country, it's a relatively free country, it's a relatively good country, it's a relatively civilized country. That's a reason to support it, but to support its specific Jewishness, if you will. It's not even about ethnicity, because, I don't know, Jews from Yemen and Jews from Poland and Jews from Morocco, all three of those groups have very little in common with one another. They don't look alike. The Jews from Yemen have very dark skin. The Jews from Morocco look Hispanic. The Jews from Poland look like Poles. Blonde hair, blue eyes, many of them have. They're not ethnically the same. They're not racially the same. They're not religious particularly. So what are they? They're Jews because the world has decided they're Jews, and they'll be hated whether they acknowledge their Judaism or not. Hitler didn't ask you if you were Jewish or not before putting you into the gas chamber. If your grandparents were Jews, you were a Jew. If you had any Jewish blood by his characterization, you were a Jew. It didn't matter if you were religious or not religious. It didn't matter if you were a Zionist or not a Zionist. It didn't matter what kind of a Jew you were. So I think in that sense, Herzl had real foresight, landed up saving a lot of people because he died relatively young, during World War I, towards the end of World War I he died. So he did not certainly see the establishment of the State of Israel. Somebody says most Jews are white, blonde, yet they're not accepted by Europeans. Most Jews are not white and blonde. I mean, most European Jews are white, obviously, but they're not. I mean, this is where the whole concept of race and genes, I mean, if you look at the genome, it's completely messed up. And most Jews, I don't know if most Jews are Ashkenazi Jews. I don't know what the numbers are. 50% of Israel is not white in the European sense of that word. All right. So Herzl, I think, is an interesting, important character in the history of Europe, and is crucial to the establishment of the State of Israel and establishment. Herzl was also fairly classical liberal. He was pro-liberty. He was pro some form of free markets. He was not a capitalist, but he was pretty good on most of these issues. Michael asks, are Europeans skinnier than us because they know if they get sick, the healthcare system sucks? No. Or have the high taxes given them less income to spend on large quantities of food? No. Or are they just more disciplined than we are? I don't know, but none of those strike me as true. Why are Europeans skinnier than Americans? Although the Brits are catching up. The Brits are catching up in terms of obesity. I think obesity is a feature of wealth. It's rich countries, particularly at certain stages of development, that tend to be obese. It is countries where people don't exercise a lot, don't engage in physical activity, and consume a lot of bad food. those countries tend to be industrial countries. Why are Europeans healthier? You know, I really don't know. I think there's probably more of a cultural attitude that puts a focus on how you look. Maybe a European can comment here on how you look, on your appearance, on your health than there is an American. You know, where today if you say somebody about being obese, then you're accused of body shaming. There's something about European culture that has a certain respect for the human body that I don't think Americans have. And it very much could be that Americans are much more ambitious when it comes to work and less ambitious when it comes to the values that constitute their personal life. Europeans, I think, are a lot less ambitious when it comes to work and tend to be more ambitious, I think, when it comes to just the values, the aesthetics. Europeans dress better generally, as a general statement, than Americans. And I don't know if, you know, there's certainly countries in Europe where obesity is a problem. I know the UK is one of those countries. God, I'm sure I'm going to get into trouble for that answer about Herzl and Israel and Jewishness and everything. Seth said, thank for the unflinching conversation about Judaism and Israel. I always learn something new. I appreciate that. Thank you, Seth. Let's see. Jeff asks, if you're in your 40s, will Social Security and Medicare be obsolete by your retirement age? Will you get screwed out of all your contributions to the system due to government bankruptcy? I don't know. I mean, certainly that's a possibility, whether all or some. Look, Social Security and Medicare are going to have to be reformed in the next 20 years. How? I don't know. By the way, I probably said that 20 years ago. That's part of the problem. So it's hard to tell when the U.S. government is going to go bankrupt. It's hard to tell how it's going to happen. But if there's only way to avoid bankruptcy is to reform Medicare and Social Security. So you might get some, you might not get all, you might get nothing because you might be too wealthy to get it. I think one of the ways in which they can reform Medicare and Social Security is to mean test them. That is to only give them to the poor. But that's where Americans always fail because Americans like benefits to go to the middle class. So that's where the voters will rebel. But if the alternative is having nothing for anybody, maybe that's the only solution. But there's going to have to be reform. So yes, it's likely you won't have them or you won't have most of them. So save. If you're in your 40s, you should save. You should have a nice saving account. And you should every month put money into that saving account. You should not count on Social Security and Medicare to live on. I mean, they're pretty bleak programs anyway. All right, Scott, for $25. Hi, Yaron. You asked for suggestions on improving your show. Have you ever considered a comic partner? I don't know who that would be. You know, maybe for one show a week or one show every 2 weeks, if I could find the right person. I don't know. I mean, would that really make that much difference? And the humor would have to be kind of aligned with mine. It's tricky. It's tricky. If you have a particular person in mind, let me know. I'm willing to try it, right? I'm willing to try it. All right, guys. Let's see. We have quite a few questions, maybe 12, 13 questions. But they're all low-dollar questions. And the problem is that we're still way, way, way away from our goal of $600. And I know many of you don't like the fact that I keep asking for money. And the fact is, if we reach $600 quickly, I wouldn't do it. But you're making it more and more difficult, show by show. So, like, best friend Hank hasn't asked a Super Chat question in a month, maybe 2 months. I don't know, long time. I miss him. So, not sure what's going on. He was a quick appearance here, and then he disappeared. Don't know what's going on. Anyway, I haven't finished the questions. I've still got a bunch of them. Harold, your question is $10. I haven't got to it yet, right? Those ones are always later. So here is my encouragement. So I'm not, so I don't have to bug you all night long. Here's my encouragement. If you respond to it quickly, then I won't do it again. We've got about $300 to raise. Let's do it quickly. No more questions for $5, $10. $50 is the preferred amount. $20 would be good. But let's get to that. Let's get to that $600 quickly. I'm not going to mention it again, but let's take a shot at it. All right. While I'm answering these $5 and $10 questions, if you jump in with the $20 questions, yours will get priority. Sip of water. Where else is anybody out there, anywhere, taking on the diversity of questions that I take on and giving you at least decent responses to them? I don't know anybody out there who's doing it. All right, Alex asked, why don't we expand HSAs? The only criticism for expanding HSAs I've seen is they reduce the distributive effect of insurance, which is not the purpose of insurance. It's risk mitigation. Yeah, I mean, we should be expanding HSAs. HSAs are a great way in which to manage health insurance. HSAs are where you have a tax-free account in which you put money aside for health expenses, and you buy an insurance policy that covers you for catastrophic loss. You have a huge deductible. Most of that deductible can be carried in the HSA. HSAs can be rolled over from year to year, so you can accumulate more and more money. So when you get older and you need that money more, you can use it, and you can cover your deductibles. You can even use it to pay your health insurance costs. You can use it ultimately so you can get the tax benefits of HSAs. Are an amazing thing. I've had in the past HSAs. I don't have one in Puerto Rico for a variety of reasons, but HSAs are amazing things, right? And they're not expanded. And the reason they're not expanded is because they depend on you being responsible for yourself. They depend on you taking ownership over your finances when it comes to healthcare. They make you the responsible party. They completely depend on your level of that responsibility and your ability to plan and your ability to manage. And that's exactly what the welfare state takes away from us. It doesn't want us to be personally responsible. It doesn't want us to have autonomy. It doesn't want us to make decisions for ourselves. It doesn't want us to save money for our healthcare. It wants us to be dependent, whether it's on the government or on insurance companies that are dependent on the government. And a lot of the justification for it is a platonic justification. You don't know how to manage your healthcare. You don't know how to do an HSA. You wouldn't know how much to put aside. You wouldn't know how much to take as a deductible. We can't trust you. And then you'll fail, and then you'll be dependent on the state, on Medicare or Medicaid or whatever. Of course, HSAs are the solution. We should abandon Obamacare. We should drop all regulations of insurance companies, and we should allow a complete and utter free market in HSAs. But that's not allowed. They're limited, they're regulated, they're controlled. It's not allowed. Only very few people do HSAs because it's not promoted, it's not advocated for, and not a lot of people know about them because we're encouraged to be stupid. We're encouraged to be dumb. We're encouraged not to think for ourselves. were encouraged not to take on personal responsibility. All right. In Australia, people believe, this is Harold, this is your question. In Australia, people believe strict lockdowns were a huge success. We had very low deaths. Would you call it success? Is this a success due to government failing testing? So lockdowns was the only viable option? No, lockdowns cannot be an option. I mean, maybe a lockdown for a week or two because the hospital system is overloaded, but lockdowns are never an option because it's a massive violation of individual rights. The job of government is not to prevent deaths. It's not to prevent deaths. It's to prevent murder. It's to catch the killers. But it's not to prevent deaths. So, Australia, quote, succeeded in preventing deaths. But at what cost to life? Are you ever going to get those months that you were forced into lockdown back? Is there any way the joy that was taken away from you could be returned to you? Any way the income that you lost can be returned to you? Any way the businesses that had to shut down could be returned to you? Any way your autonomy could be returned to you? No. Now, it's true Australia failed on the testing, just like everybody else did, but it failed to conceive of an appropriate response to COVID, which was to test, trace, isolate, and otherwise leave people alone. And if hospitals are in distress, help the hospitals out. Given that Australia has a semi-socialized medicine, it's the government's job to make sure that the hospitals have the capacity. So invest heavily in hospital capacity during the COVID. The same should have been done in the US. The same should have been done in Europe. Since government regulates hospital capacity, government should have invested in hospital capacity. Australia also was very slow with vaccine rollouts. That's a failure. So look, if your standard is not to die, then it was a huge success. But, you know, there are lots of things we could do if that's the standard. You know, we could prevent rape by having lockdowns for males, only for men, from, let's say, 8 p.m. until 7 a.m. Numbers of rapes would go down dramatically. Dramatically. Indeed, murder rates would go down dramatically. Well, maybe not. Maybe more murders would happen in the home, but less would happen outside of the home. I mean, you know, you can lock people up and prevent all kinds of bad things from happening. Doesn't mean it's still wrong to lock them up. The standard is not the prevention of any bad thing. The standard is individual rights. The standard is a free society. Ryan asks, thank you for the 28 Canadians. John Mackey debate. He said profit seekers are narcissists. God. Later, he said his goal was to heal America. That statement struck me as quite narcissistic. Who does he think he is? Jesus. Well, he thinks he's a successful businessman who's kind of a libertarian who wants to soften libertarianism so that everybody will embrace it and thus we heal America. He thinks the way to heal America is through altruism. Everybody thinks the way to heal America is through altruism. Everybody thinks the way to run America is through altruism. Altruism is dominant out there, dominant by far. And it's the altruism that you have to get out of John Mackey. It's the altruism that we have to get out of the culture. As long as the culture is altruistic, we will not be free. It's just a reality. Ryan continues. John Mackey debate. Another 28 Canadian. Thank you. I felt that John was constantly strawmanning you. Yes, he was. Making statements about your position out of context. Absolutely. He's an intelligent man. If he was consciously strawmanning, does that make him dishonest? Yeah, if it's conscious, but even an intelligent person, he thinks, you see, the way he rationalizes it himself is that I'm not saying the truth. I'm not saying what my position really implies. I'm not saying what I really stand for. It's the people who've read Ayn Rand, who then say, well, you know, she's about picking babes in the bar. That's what egoism is. That is dishonest, but it's also, it's mainly, they're dishonest to themselves. They think that. But it's a way for them psychologically to handle the fact that they don't want to accept that morality, but they have no argument against it. So they impose on it things that are absurd and ridiculous so they can afford to reject it. Selfishness equals promiscuity. Well, we know promiscuity is bad, so of course selfishness is bad. And I knew from the beginning I didn't want to be selfish. Now it's just a matter of how do I rationalize it. Russell, 20 Canadian. Thank you, Russell. Hey, Yaron, first time, long time. First time, long time. Not sure what that means, first time, long time. All right. Could you do an analysis of the recent viral opinion piece on YouTube by New York Times, Liberal Hypocrisy Fueled American Inequality? Here's how, released a month ago. I can't because I haven't read it. But I am going to read it. Thanks for pointing it out. I'm putting in my list of things to do. Oh, I haven't done the Shahzad movie review. Have to do that. Maybe I might have to postpone it, Shahzad. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, it's getting late. I'll do the movie review next time. Okay. Daniel says. I'll look at that New York Times piece and try to answer your question next time. And I'll try to do the Shahzad movie review next time. Daniel asks, has AOI ever considered supporting freelancers? For example, a small competition for a published article presenting Rand's ideas, etc. Obviously, there's some challenges, but perhaps it would have potential. Well, I mean, we've considered all kinds of things. The challenge is that to get a piece written that's good, that AOI can put its signature behind it, takes a lot of work. So even good writers, they can write good stuff, but the amount of editing we do at the Institute, to do that with external writers, wow, it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult. It's hard. But I think the best way for freelancers to get engaged with the Institute in this way is to take the OAC and to take the writing class and to show your ability in writing and to learn from our writing instructors. And then, you know, apply for a grant or something to write some articles. I think that is the better path to go. Mike, the U.S. is struggling to find nurses for the hospitals that currently exist. Is the government suppressing entry into the field? This is a problem that would have to be solved before we have more hospitals. No, this is a problem that can be solved like that. I could solve it in a week. The answer to it is immigration, always has been. And for years, we used to have nurses immigrate, nurses from the Philippines, nurses from Eastern Europe, nurses from all over the world. And the American nurses lobbied against it. And nursing schools lobbied against it. And of course, you need a license to be a nurse. And the license is granted by the state. And you can only work as a nurse in the state that granted you the license. So imagine a law that says, imagine a law that did away with all licensing of nursing. But not as good, but an improvement. Imagine a federal law that said, if you get a nursing license in state X, it applies to all licenses. Imagine a law that said, if you want to come to the country and work as a nurse, and somebody will hire you as a nurse, here's your green card. For that matter, imagine a law that said, if somebody wants to hire you in the United States and you can show that they have given you an employment offer, here's your green card. Any profession, from picker of strawberries all the way to nurses and doctors and physicists and engineers and whatever. Imagine that. Imagine that kind of law. Hey, not welfare recipients. You have to have a job offer. You have to come to work. But if you've got a job offer, we'll let you in. Imagine a world in which that happened. Neither Democrats nor Republicans will allow that to happen. Well, neither one of them will allow that to happen. All right. We're 420. We're 180 short. I don't know if anybody can help us get to the 600, but 180 short, and we probably got 10 more minutes or so. Well, more than 10 minutes because I got a bunch of questions. Please, no more $5 questions. I'll answer it because it's my call, but no more $5 questions. Questions now are $20 and above, with the emphasis on above. All right. Guys, you guys are making it more and more difficult for me to reach the goals and spending more and more time arguing for money. Amar Pancake says, you don't need to try to win me over with facts and figures. You had me at chocolate pyramids. I'm glad. I'm glad. Chocolate works with a lot of people. Alex writes, a problem is a lot of doctors subscribe to the labor theory of value instead of what the market will bear when it comes to wages. I'm not sure what you're referencing there, but yes, most people who've taken economics class, unfortunately, subscribe to the labor theory of value. Daniel asks, for someone in their mid-30s with a decent nest egg in Roth IRAs, does it make sense to start an employee-sponsored 401k or keep these resources to invest in Roth and take advantage of accumulated interest? I mean, generally, I really like Roth IRAs better than I do other forms of investing. You might be able to get a 401k that acts like a Roth. Look, it's very hard for me to answer this question because it depends on your quality, you know, how much you need to live well. So I'm a big believer in saving after you're living well. So make sure you're living the way you want to live and then save the rest and save them in Roth IRAs, but there's a cap on Roth IRAs, and if you've reached the cap, then use the 401k. But you want to save in tax-efficient ways. And 401k is a pretty tax-efficient way. A Roth IRA is a better tax-efficient way, but better some tax efficiency than no tax efficiency. So, one, live a decent life, good life. Two, save as much as you can. I mean, up to a point. Alex says, another factor with homeless is weather in California. I think we talked about that. Yes, that's absolutely right. Hi, Yaron. Thanks for some great shows lately. Ryan writes, I haven't been able to listen live. Well, I'm glad you made it this time. Thanks for being here. Also from Ryan. Oh, no, same thing. All right. Copied it over twice. Okay, we're almost done. We're getting very, very close. We're getting close to the 2 hour mark, too. Christopher says, love your show. What's your opinion on literature? Should I take time to read books such as A Communist Manifesto or similar books for a fair understanding of all sides, or don't waste my time? It depends on what your interests are. Don't read anything that doesn't interest you. Life is too short. And by the way, the Communist Manifesto is not literature. Literature is fiction. And I'd rather read Hugo or I don't know, almost any literature than the Communist Manifesto. Your focus should be on enjoying life, not on fair understanding of all sides when the other sides are evil. If you're an intellectual, you need to read the Communist Manifesto. If you're not, absolutely not. What for? Why waste your time? I mean, if you want to get a basic understanding of what it is, get an abridged version or listen to a podcast or something that gives a quick summary of it or something like that. But no, don't spend your time reading books for the sake of reading books. There are lots of all sides, and some sides are not worth investing in. But don't confuse nonfiction with literature. Literature is Dostoevsky, Hugo, it's Ayn Rand. Read fiction. Read fiction. No, not the communist type of fiction. Fiction. All right. Frank asks, it's 50th anniversary of A Clockwork Orange. The Alex character lives in a government apartment building that's always dirty and vandalized. No one takes care of it. Yes. Public housing. He lives in public housing, which is always horrific. It's horrific in the US, it's horrific in England, it's horrific everywhere. All right, Alex. The government is so bad, it botched basically an annuity, Social Security, a product older than the Federal Reserve. Well, it botched it because it set it up from the beginning as a pyramid scheme, where the young pay for the old. It never set it up as an annuity. It never constructed it as an annuity. It basically was set up so young people during the Great Depression would bail out old people during the Great Depression. All right, we've got our last question, which is Michael's. If you want to help us get to the $600 mark, now's your chance to make that happen. Value for value. Otherwise, we're going to call it a night. I misunderstood the joke. Yes, no, you said that communism is fiction. I get that. Yes, I get it. I try to make my own spin on what you wrote, Wonder Freeman. All right, last chance to contribute to your Yaron Brook Show tonight. Next show will be on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll be on Is Morality Practical? And on Sunday, we will be doing a Christmas hangout. Right? So we are short $155. If somebody wants to drop $155 on it and we can make it there, that'd be great, but you've only got like less than 5 minutes. Michael says, Nancy Pelosi has a net worth of over $100 million. I don't know if that's true, but maybe. A worse than useless parasite that people keep electing. I think most of that money was her husband. Her husband was actually productive. So whatever wealth she has, I think it's from her husband. But don't forget, politicians somehow make money. Maybe insider trading is a big part of that. Big part of that. Apollo, thank you for the support. I really appreciate it. Guys, I appreciate your small contributions as well. There's another Apollo contribution. That rate, so thank you for whatever you can afford or whatever you choose to support the Yaron Brook Show with. Alex, that is amazing. Thank you. Very generous. Gets us to $35. $35 short, about $35 short of our goal, $36 short of our goal. So thank you, Alex. Alex says, Merry Christmas, Yaron. What is a favorite physical gift you've received from a loved one? And what's a favorite you've given? Oh, God. I don't know. I really don't know. I have to admit this. This is not easy for me to admit. I don't do gifts well. I don't give great gifts. I don't know how to. I don't know what people like. I have no idea. I'd rather give them money. Like, if I chose jewelry for my wife, it's very likely she won't like it because I'm not good at it. But if I gave my wife the money to choose the jewelry, she'd buy something she loves and she wouldn't feel like obligated because I gave it to her. So I'd much rather give her the money. So I'm not very attuned to gift giving, and the same with getting gifts. I just can't remember what a significant gift was, right? I know people who love gifts. My wife and I, we basically buy each other things that we know the other person wants. So I'll buy my gifts and she'll buy her gifts. We don't do surprise gifts. We don't do, and I'm not good at this. Not good at this buying gifts, I think, for my kids or anybody. So I apologize if I've never given you a gift out there, or if the gift wasn't very good. My fault. All right, we're at $558. We're short $42. $42. If somebody wants to jump in with a $40 contribution, that would be cool. Shazbot was asking something. What was Shazbot asking? Something about the movie review. I can't see it. Anyway, I'm going to try to do the movie review, the Measure of a Man, on Thursday. I might put it up front to get it done, but I'll definitely do it either Thursday or Sunday. But I'll really try to do it Thursday, right? So we can get that off the table. Then I've got I think I've got 3 movies I owe you guys. 3 movies I owe you guys. Kiki's Delivery Service, the Kurosawa movie, Up and Down, Down and Up, something like that, and then there was a third movie that I can't remember. All on my list to get done. I apologize for not having it done yet, and I apologize for not doing Measure of a Man. I don't know how it slipped by me. I was going to do it and slipped by me. Okay, don't forget to like the show before you leave. Give it a thumbs up before you leave. Don't forget to support the show on a monthly basis at yaronbrookshow.com/support. It's how we sustain the show long run. Super Chat is great. Super Chat is motivating. Super Chat is cool. Super Chat is short. $40 today. You can still change that. But what really I value is the monthly contributions. Those are great. So keep all of it coming. You can do that at yaronbrookshow.com/support. Patreon, subscribe, star on locals. And finally, I don't know. I don't have a finally. Like the show. Support the show. I'll see you all on Thursday. Kiki's Delivery Service is a movie. Animated kids movie that I've been incentivized to watch. Annalise is begging. You guys put Annalise in a position where she's begging to reach her goal, which is $600. Somebody come in with $42 and not let Annalise go to bed feeling depressed for not reaching the goal. All right. Let's see. I will see you all on Thursday. Bye, everybody. Have a great week.